Haitian immigrants, the infrastructure bill, and vaccine equity. I'm Cecily Fernandez, and this is the Square Circle. Hello and welcome to the Square Circle. I'm your host, Cecily Fernandez. Joining us today are conservative columnist for the Washington Examiner, Quin Hillyer. Quin, welcome.
Thank you, Cecily. Glad to be on with you.
Libertarian Kat Murti of Feminists for Liberty. Kat, how you doing?
Hi, happy to be on again.
Great. And progressive political reporter James Rosen. Hello, James.
Hi, good to be here.
Thanks for being here. Well, this week saw the latest crisis at the southern border, this one involving thousands of immigrants from Haiti. Here's a story from Reuters.
As authorities grapple with deteriorating conditions at a southern U.S. border camp where thousands of migrants have gathered, most of them from Haiti, the White House is pushing back on pressure from all sides. Press Secretary Jen Psaki on Wednesday acknowledged the poor conditions and condemned the U.S. Border Patrol agents' use of reins to intimidate migrants trying to cross the river.
We've watched the photos of Haitians gathering under a bridge, many with families, and the horrific video of the CBP officers on horses using brutal and inappropriate measures against innocent people. I think it's important to address that and separately address what our immigration policies are.
The images led Vice President Kamala Harris on Wednesday to raise grave concerns in a call with DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, her spokesman said. Psaki said the agents have been put on administrative leave while the incident is investigated.
Kat, it seems pretty much everyone is angry about the situation at the border. Why is President Biden's immigration policy failing?
Well, if there's one thing that these truly disturbing images we've seen at the border of Haitian migrants being literally whipped by border agents on horseback, if there's one thing that we should be getting out of that, it's that we have immigration policy that is just as bad as it has always been. The Republicans have panned President Biden for being an open borders president, and he is anything but. If anything, he's just as bad as President Trump, just as bad as Deporter-in-Chief President Obama. And the situation at the border really hasn't changed. Immigration is a positive good for this country, and the way in which the United States treats migrants at our borders is despicable. This looks horrible, and I'm glad that we're at least facing up to it. And I really hope that we can see some actual immigration policy reform.
Quin, do you agree? What do you make of the situation at the border?
I do not agree. And look, I'm a moderate restrictionist. I'm not a hardliner on immigration, but legal immigration might be good, but illegal immigration is bad. And this thing is horrible. And it is Biden's fault. He has tried to stop construction of the wall. He has eliminated the stay in Mexico policy. He has supported sanctuary cities. He has done just about everything he could to, in effect, put a glowing neon welcome sign on the border without having any way to handle the hordes that he has invited over here. And there is no excuse for it. The policy was working pretty well by the end of Trump's term, although I've got to say we do need to reform our legal immigration system to make it easier and smoother to get here legally. The setup of the INS is appalling, and I think Kat would agree with me on that. But I draw the line at illegal immigration absolutely is always going to cause problems like we're seeing now. And then meanwhile, the Biden administration has done everything to make it worse.
James, where do you fall on this issue? Who's to blame for the crisis at the border?
I guess I come down somewhere between Kat and Quin. I agree with elements of what each of them said. there's a gray area between illegal immigration and refugee status. And President Trump, Kat was right that President Obama, unknown to many people, was the deporter in chief. He deported twice as many undocumented workers as President George W. Bush. Few people know that. Nobody knows quite why. There's some theories about that. But especially during a pandemic, President Trump greatly limited both the number of legal immigrants and especially the number of people who could come in claiming refugee status, fleeing violence or other threats to their lives and their families' lives. And so, Haiti has had, as people know, their president or prime minister was assassinated. They've had one disaster after another. I think clearly they have legitimate reasons to be fleeing their homeland, but it's a gray area between refugee status and legal immigration. Having said that, I think some of the images that we saw of horseback riding border agents whipping, using these extremely long whips to whip Haitians who are Black, of course, that harkens back to a really horrible era in our country's history. Very unfortunate images, whatever the policy is.
I've got to jump in there because that's just not true. Those are not whips. Those are reins. They did not hit a single immigrant with those whips. Those are reins, and they twirled the reins for several reasons. One, to help guide the horse, and two, to keep the immigrants from being able to grab the reins and therefore take control of the horse. There's not a single whip there, and they have not hit a single person with it. And that is just a flat out media misrepresentation. And we don't need to be spreading it because it's false.
Regardless of what may have happened, I think it certainly reflects very poorly upon our country when that is the international image being shown of America at the border. Whether or not anyone was actually struck, it certainly doesn't look very good. But Quinn, I do think you're right about one thing. It does seem to a lot of migrants that the Democrats, because of the way that the Democrats sell themselves, are pro-immigration, that there would be, as you've said, that they've put a welcome sign on the border. On the other hand, in no way has their policy matched up to it, and they don't seem at all interested in doing so. President Biden is deporting people. He's deporting those Haitian immigrants. And over and over and over again, we get this false idea that it's red versus blue and Team Red doesn't like immigration and Team Blue does. And that's just not what's happening. We have a massive immigration problem in this country. I too would like to see more legal immigration. And the way that we get rid of illegal immigration is to make it easier and safer to come here, particularly for folks who really want to be here and want to be Americans and are coming from dangerous, awful situations. And I think it looks really bad for our country that not only do we have these images going out representing what's happening under President Biden, but also that our approach to immigration, our approach to people who want to be here is to kick them out in this way.
James, did you want to get in there?
I just want to say that, I was talking about the optics. I mean, whether somebody was struck or wasn't struck, the images I saw, it looked like it harkened back to, the whipping of slaves. Whether that's what was going on or not, people around the world are gonna make that connection, and it's just bad optics, and I don't think it's necessary.
Okay, we'll leave it there.
No, let me jump in again. The horses are there for several reasons. The horses are there because the terrain is much easier for a horse to navigate than for vehicles to navigate, and the horses are there because they are good at crowd control. And when you ride a horse, you have reins. And whatever the image is, those horses belong there. And we have a right to protect our border. And to say that the Biden policy is almost as restrictive as Trump's is just not true. Biden is just right now putting up as head of ICE, head of immigration enforcement, a guy who is openly in favor of sanctuary cities.
Frankly, this whole optics discussion shouldn't be happening because we shouldn't have this situation. We need to have quick and easy legal pathways for people who want to come here, who want to be Americans, who want to contribute to our country to be able to do so.
Okay. Next topic, President Biden is meeting with congressional Democrats to head off a number of potential crises. Here's MSNBC's coverage.
Yasmin, this is a broad cross-section of the Democratic Party that illustrates the magnitude of his task. It includes the leadership, of course, Speaker Pelosi and Senator Schumer. It includes centrist Democratic leaders like Stephanie Murphy and Josh Gottheimer. And it includes the leaders of the progressive faction, specifically Pramila Jayapal and her ally in the Senate, Bernie Sanders. Now, one way to think of this is as a squabbling family that is fighting amongst each other and needs an intervention. And this is the patriarch kind of stepping in to make sure everyone is on the same page to resolve these differences, because President Biden's agenda does face a real risk of going off the rails if he cannot resolve the divisions. Here are the divisions in a nutshell. Centrist Democrats are demanding that the House move forward with that September 27th vote on that Senate-passed physical infrastructure bill. They want to pass that, send it to President Biden's desk, go home, campaign on it, cut some ribbons, and celebrate that victory. Progressives don't want to pass that just yet. They say they've pointed out for months they'll only let that move with that multi-trillion-dollar package at the same time, and they're worried that if infrastructure passes without the reconciliation bill, that the centrists will have no use for that massive safety net package and will try to shrink or kill it. So that is a division that President Biden, and it appears only President Biden at this point, it will be able to resolve. He's got his work cut out.
Quinn, what do you make of this family squabble that kind of pits moderate Democrats against the progressive wing when it comes to big spending?
I'm sort of liking it because it's nice to see a few moderates still remain in the Democratic Party, or at least people that want to pretend that they're moderates for their voters. Joe Biden got elected by pretending to be a moderate and has pushed the most radical leftist administration I have ever seen. And when you have already spent $5.6 trillion on COVID relief, much of it unnecessary, and then you want to add $1.2 trillion for infrastructure, only 30% of which is actually infrastructure, and then you want to add $3.5 trillion of unnecessary social spending on top of that, completely busting the budget. It's nice to see at least a few, maybe 6 or 7 Democratic House members and maybe 2 Democratic Senate members actually stand up and say, hold on a minute, this makes no sense. This is a dangerous level of spending, and it is pushing us into unsustainable debt.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Quinn on this. The spending is atrocious. It's very concerning. It's very bad for our country. The federal government debt is already at 103% of GDP in just the last 10 years. Just since 2011, our federal debt was at 3.3 trillion. It's already up to 23 trillion. And if this bill is to go through, we're looking at 40.1 trillion by 2031. Now, this program might be being sold as something that's going to help American families, that's going to help children. The earned income tax credit is a big part of what's being rolled into this. It's supposedly supposed to be helping childcare. That's another big part of it. What this actually is borrowing against those families' future, borrowing against those children's future. I have a young son. He's the one who's going to actually be facing this debt. It's unsustainable, dangerous debt. And at the same time, we have soaring inflation. This is just going to get worse and worse and worse. This might look good. This might be a nice selling point when it comes to the polls for Democrats. But at the end of the day, we're being sold a bag of goods.
James, do you want to jump in and defend the spending plans?
Well, I mean, there are elements of it that I like, elements of it that I like less. I think the progressives in Congress who are holding the infrastructure bill hostage, at least in the Senate vote, there indicates there's bipartisan support for it. President Trump came into office pushing infrastructure spending. I think that's a mistake. I think the Democrats are saying that if they don't get this massive $3.5 trillion. The progressives are saying if they don't get this massive $3.5 trillion bill passed, then they won't vote for the infrastructure bill. I think that's a big mistake. I think there's been bipartisan support for infrastructure support for a long time. And our roads and bridges and ports and other things, I think there's money for the internet here. Is great need of repair. I drive around parts of the country all the time and I see it. I think they should pass the infrastructure bill and then deal with some of these other programs. I think as has happened in the past with these massive spending bills, if they don't use reconciliation to just ram it through, it will get whittled down and passed with a smaller price tag.
It should be said that at a time when we are dealing with an absolute crisis related to COVID, with 2,000 Americans dying every single day, at a time when we have just been embarrassed on the world stage in Afghanistan, at a time when our debt does already exceed GDP, there should be a sense, especially from a guy who ran as somebody supposedly moderate, pushing a return to normal, there should be a sense that it's time to work toward the middle and to see what we can agree on. And basically, most people agree on some form of infrastructure, even though I think it's too big. But to agree on what we agree, pass that, and push off the bigger fights until later. And failure to do that, failure to unify the country on what we do agree on, and instead continuing to push these big, massive fights is bad, not just economically, it's bad for the whole political system, and it's shameful that Biden is doing so.
The problem with that is that the Senate Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, on 8 years under Obama and now under Biden, has said his policy is to block every single initiative of those two Democratic presidents. And indeed, that's what he's done. The Democrats under George W. Bush, they worked with him on No Child Left Behind, on education reforms, on other things. The Republicans, as a matter of policy, have refused to work with the Democrats on anything. So to say that they should agree on what they should agree on when one side refuses to agree on anything is a little bit, I think, naive.
There are two bills that are being talked about. There's a $3.5 trillion social spending bill and the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. Jim said that McConnell will not cooperate on anything. The fact of the matter is McConnell already voted for the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. So that's what I was talking about. Republicans have said that on the smaller bill, they will cooperate, and McConnell has already shown that.
Okay. Moving on to COVID, President Biden announced the donation of millions of COVID vaccines doses to poor nations. Here's the president.
Today, I'm announcing another historic commitment. The United States is buying another 500 million doses of Pfizer to donate to low and middle income countries around the world. This is another 500 million doses that will all be shipped by this time next year.
So, James, let me start with you. Do you think it's responsible for the Biden administration to be shipping millions of doses of COVID vaccines at this time?
We have always helped poor countries in all kinds of different ways, starting with foreign aid, food aid. This is still a global crisis and a global pandemic. I think we should be wise about it and focus on the countries that have the highest infection rates, and the lowest access to vaccines. I don't think we should just willy-nilly spread vaccines around the country, but certainly we've gone from a position of not having enough vaccines for our own citizens to having a surplus of vaccines. And I think we should, we've made some strides, but I think we should be doing more than we're doing.
Okay, Kat, what do you think? Is this a good idea to be shipping millions of COVID vaccines to poor nations?
Well, I wish that these vaccines were more freely available on the free market. The reason that we've had these shortages in the first place is because they've been centrally controlled by governments that really limited their production for quite a while. That said, this is a global pandemic. It's a global problem. more people should have access to take the vaccines if they choose to do so. And in as much as we're able to get them out to more folks, I think that's better. I think also the Biden administration is really hurting right now in terms of its perception internationally on foreign policy, both because of Afghanistan, because of the situation we've seen with the Haitian immigrant crisis on the border. And this small gesture of goodwill could really help the administration, could really help the United States reputation globally.
Quinn, what do you think of that? Do you think that part of this is President Biden trying to do some, PR, get some good press for shipping millions of COVID vaccines overseas?
Well, it might be, but it's also just wise. I mean, it is a global pandemic and it does cross borders. And if you help suppress the pandemic anywhere, you end up doing at least a little to help suppress it everywhere. We have excess capacity here because so many Americans, about 25% of Americans, still will not take the vaccine here. So we might as well use them.
Okay, we're going to move on to some great questions from our viewers. And the first one is from Annie Love, and I'm going to give this to Kat first. Is Democrats' immigration policy all that much different from the GOP's in practice?
No, it's really not. I wish that it were. Both parties really benefit off of selling the lie that the Republicans are anti-immigration and the Democrats are pro-immigration. But fundamentally, they're pursuing a lot of the same policies. Biden's policies are not that different in practice from President Trump's. And as I mentioned earlier, President Obama may have gotten a lot of press for being very pro-immigration, but he's our biggest deporter in all of American history. Frankly, I wish that were the case. I wish there were a party that were more pro-immigration, that understood that immigration helps America and helps Americans and builds us a better country. But that's just not the case. Red or blue, we're just not getting good immigration policy. And that's something that we need to focus on a lot more. And we need to make a situation where people who want to come here, who want to contribute and build a better country can do so, and they can do so quickly and legally.
Quinn, do Democrats and Republicans differ in their immigration policies?
Absolutely, 100%. First of all, Biden, one of the very first executive orders that he signed said he was suspending for 6 months all deportations. Now, the courts blocked him, but that's number one. Number two, he's trying to put as head of immigration enforcement a guy who's for sanctuary cities. He's got a vice president who is for sanctuary cities. He eliminated the stay in Mexico policy. I could go right down the list. He is right now releasing into the country thousands and thousands and thousands of illegal immigrants. Some of the Haitians, hundreds of them. He just flew into Maryland yesterday and has flown them into other states today. Yes, there is a very big difference in the policies between Trump and Biden, and Trump did not do everything right, and Trump's tone was totally wrong on immigration. But what Biden has done has invited this crisis at the border. It is a Democratic policy choice, and it's a bad one.
James, what do you think? Do the two parties differ in their immigration policies?
I think you have to differentiate. Quinn was just talking about presidents. I think you have to differentiate between presidents and their members, their lawmakers in Congress, because there have been significant fissures, splits between presidents and their own party going back decades. I mean, I remember when George W. Bush, who had a very open policy as governor of Texas toward immigration, tried working with Senator McCain, and believe it or not, Senator Graham and Chuck Schumer, tried very hard to pass major immigration reform, and he was stopped, George W. Bush was, by members of his own party. President Obama deported a record number of undocumented workers, which really angered, again, members of his own party in Congress. So it's hard to talk. You have to separate the presidents from the parties. President Trump, even though Republican lawmakers wouldn't say it because they didn't dare cross him, a number of things that he said and did regarding immigration did not sit well with some of the members of, some of the lawmakers from his own party. I think it's a mishmash. I don't think you can draw clear lines.
Okay. We'll move on to our next question from a viewer, from Tony Graham. And he asks, do free market principles apply to vaccines and vaccine distribution? And I think we should go to our libertarian first. Kat, what do you think about free market principles applying to vaccines?
Absolutely. We have not seen these, what would have happened had companies been able to produce these vaccines, had they been able to produce things like rapid tests quicker. I think that this whole pandemic would have fared much better globally. So many people's lives would have been saved if the free market had actually been able to roll out a response to COVID much faster than happened under our centralized economy approach when it came to this pandemic. And that's not even looking at all of the economic policies, all of the massive damage that's happened from other related policies such as shutdowns. But simply just looking at the medicine side of this, if as soon as we had a vaccine in January of last year, if as soon as we had rapid tests available, if they had been available to anybody who's wishing to pay for them to try them out, I think a lot of lives could have been saved. And it's truly disturbing that we're still not seeing that happen. The only places where I've seen the free market really get a chance to do its magic when it comes to COVID have been some of the regulations that have been lifted around telehealth, and also some of the certificate of need laws that were temporarily or completely repealed in some of the states, allowing medical personnel from other states to come and help those who are in overcrowded, understaffed hospitals. What we've really seen from COVID is that we really need the free market, particularly in these massive times of crisis, which is when a lot of times government tries to step up and shut everything down. Had they not done that, this whole pandemic would have turned out much better, I think.
Quinn, what do you think? Do you think that the free market principles have been a big help when it comes to vaccines and vaccine distribution?
Well, actually, this is one time, and I'm almost as big a free marketer as you'll ever find, and I've got 40 years to prove it. But to say that that the market would have worked any faster than what did work to produce vaccines just doesn't make any sense. This is the fastest development of vaccines in the history of the world. And within 2 months after the vaccine being proven effective, every American citizen that wanted vaccines could get it. So we didn't need the market for vaccines. Now, Kat is right that we did a lot of other things in the meantime that destroyed our free market and in other goods. All these shutdowns, all these mandates, shutting down businesses. We are still feeling the effects with real bad problems in our supply chains for all sorts of goods and services right now. We didn't need to interfere with the free market the way that we did, but government actually does have a role in a crisis and did the role really well in working with the private sector, with these companies to give them the money or in effect to give them the money with which they could go ahead and develop the vaccines when there wasn't a market for the vaccines yet, because you can't have a market for something that's not there.
Okay. And James, do free market principles apply to vaccines and vaccine distribution?
You know, I agree completely with Quinn. We couldn't have done a better job in developing and distributing this vaccine. It was much faster than any other vaccine in the history of medicine worldwide, a full stop. CDC made some early mistakes, some stupid mistakes in regard to testing. But the notion that the free market, when it comes to medicine and drugs, does a good job. The history tells you the opposite. Without government oversight, they've killed millions of people. And the main problem now is that the big insurance companies and big pharma are in bed with each other. And that's why, for instance, I'm on a Medicare D drug plan, which is supposed to be regulated, and that my drug costs, even though I'm on Medicare, are skyrocketing. And this is because big insurance and big pharma are in bed with each other. And so the notion of a free market in our medical system is just a complete myth. There is no free market.
Okay. Well, thank you to our viewers for those excellent questions. We're going to move on to most underreported story of the week. Kat, can we go to you first? What's your most underreported story of the week?
Absolutely. It's a truly disturbing story out of Loudoun County, Virginia, where Judge James Fisher imprisoned a domestic violence victim who was in court to testify against her abuser. When instead of hearing her testimony, she was interrupted and questioned repeatedly about potential drug use and about infidelity on her part, as if that would somehow justify domestic violence used against her. It did come up that she had consumed cannabis earlier in the day. It is worth mentioning that cannabis is legal in the state of Virginia, and yet she was jailed. The trial was interrupted, and this is a travesty of injustice where a violent offender where a violent offense was interrupted in order for someone to be jailed for something that is not even a crime and has no victims.
Okay. Quinn, what about you? What's your most underreported story of the week?
The most underreported story of the week was also the most underreported and or misreported story of last fall, and that is Hunter Biden's laptop. Now there is yet more confirmation, this time from Politico, that the number one most important email that was identified as having come from Hunter Biden's laptop did come from Hunter Biden's laptop. And yet the media is not reporting it. This is the same media that spent all of last fall repeating the absolute lie for which there was not a single shred of evidence that the laptop was Russian disinformation. And now Politico has basically confirmed that the email from the executive of the Burisma company in Ukraine, which was what the entire first impeachment revolved around, when he sent an email thanking Hunter for having set up a meeting with Joe Biden, the night before, that email was sent, was real, was accurate. And it's not important for what it says about Hunter. It shows what I and so many others who paid attention said all along. This scandal is not about Hunter Biden, it's about Joe Biden, because Joe Biden was aiding and abetting the sleazy profiteering of his son. And Joe denied it, but now there is yet more proof that Joe Biden was lying, and that really reflects on the entire conduct of not just his presidency, but his vice presidency as well.
And James, now to you, do you have an underreported story of the week to share?
Yeah, there's a story that's been getting coverage from technology reporters, and it's been on the business pages, but I think it deserves a much wider airing because it's pretty stunning, which is that Apple, of course, one of the 2 or 3 biggest companies in the world, which has had success after success, is all of a sudden facing all kinds of problems. It's facing its employees are using the app called Slack to communicate with one another around the country and around the world, and sharing grievances and finding out problems that are much less isolated than they thought, and then complaining about it. A number of them wrote an open letter to CEO Cook complaining about it. The European Union is looking at legislation that would force all smartphone users to use the same charger ports, the same charger fittings, so that, and Apple makes, of course, a fortune off of making people buy chargers and cables that fit only into Apple phones. That would cut into their profits significantly. And finally, South Korea is making a move, and there's other countries involved, to stop Apple's stranglehold on, and Google's involved here too, on apps that can be used on their phone. Talk about the free market. Now, most apps you have to buy in the Apple App Store, and competing apps, Apple does not allow the users to even know about them, much less buy them. So Apple's facing a lot of currents, I think that reflects, much like Facebook, that reflects some resentment over its complete dominance in this case in the smartphone world.
All right, that's all the time we have for this show. Thanks to our guests, and thank you for listening to The Square Circle. I'm Cecily Fernandez. See you next time.